This year's Japanese Grand Prix will go down as one of the dullest in modern memory. Only a single change of position within the top 10 from quali to race. The top 3 ran within 3 seconds almost the entire Grand Prix, yet absolutely nothing happened. It wasn't worth the 6 AM alarm, turns out. In the aftermath, we've seen many a take as to why this race honked. And Twitter is of course the default home for such civil debate and dialogue. I was scrolling through a couple of days back and it popped up that old Jeremy Clarkson had just posted this. I've had an idea to make F1 racing more consistently exciting. Don't use tracks where overtaking is difficult. My reply: cars are too big, they kick off too much dirty air, use too hard a compound range, should have been C2 to 4, not C1 to 3. Suzuka ain't the problem, the F1 formula is. Many agreed, many didn't, so I'm making a video. My name's Tommo, let's talk about it. Why was overtaking difficult last weekend? That is the crux of the question. It was difficult, clearly, but why? There are many reasons beyond the track that we will get into, but I will start with the point that I do agree on. Suzuka isn't great for overtaking. That is objectively true in Formula 1. Turn 1 is too fast and doesn't invite moves unless you have a big delta, not like it would if they'd tighten that corner up and change it a bit. As of right now, you can take T1 completely flat out, although not with DRS open, Jack. The turn 11 hairpin, you can chuck one up the inside. Carlos Sainz did exactly that on Nico Hülkenberg lap 1. And then there's turn 16. You can try one down here on the inside, Senna Prost style. However, that will compromise your run down the back straight possibly and leave you open into turn 1, which again is hard to overtake at, but not impossible with DRS. I also think the fact that turn 15 130R is no longer a corner, you can just take it flat out, means that you can't take it better than the car ahead because you're all just going full guns blazing, and set yourself up to make a move into 16. Suzuka is a driver's circuit, great in qualifying, great when the heavens open, but no one's doubting that, you know, from an overtaking spectacle, it isn't that great. Yet with all that, it's also important to say that not all overtakes are measured equally. A DRS pass in a straight line does not compare to a wheel-to-wheel battle going over multiple corners. Not all overtakes are great. Sometimes they're a bit boring. I mean, looking at last year, and shout out F1 Stats Guru for this information, the top 3 overtaking circuits last year were Vegas in the cold, Spain in the hot, and then Japan. These are 3 venues that definitely wouldn't immediately come to mind if you're looking for, you know, tracks that maximize overtaking, yet the conditions that they were in last year meant that they were the top 3. Look, overtaking should be hard. It shouldn't come easy, but also it shouldn't be impossible. And unfortunately, that's what we saw in Suzuka last weekend. However, there are many reasons for that beyond the track itself. The size of modern Formula 1 cars has been a long-held criticism by most of the fan base for a pretty long time. The tracks have their set width and length, especially these purpose-built racing circuits, but even street circuits, you are limited by the restrictions of the actual streets themselves, and if you make the cars bigger, that inherently means less room to make overtakes and do things. A modern F1 car is defined by a maximum wheelbase and width of 3.6 by 2 meters. 20 years ago in 2005, those dimensions were 3 meters by 1.8. That half a meter difference in wheelbase converts to the entire car being over a meter shorter in 2005 and 20 centimeters narrower. On top of that, it's also the sense of speed that is affected. Smaller cars zip around a lot more. In fact, in 2005, look at the Alonso Schumacher move at 130R at Suzuka. Those cars being physically smaller gives more space to make moves like that possible. And the thing is, the cars nowadays in 2025 are not that much quicker than they were 20 years ago. Comparing Suzuka FP1 in 2005 to Suzuka FP1 in 2025, Pedro de la Rosa took his McLaren 20 years ago to a 130.532. This year, Lando Norris took his McLaren to a 128.549. 2 seconds different over 20 years. It's like 2.2% in terms of that Suzuka lap time. It's barely anything. Smaller cars going at the same speed mean they look quicker and they have more space to get the job done. Simple. Now look, I want to talk solutions in this video and not just moan about problems, right? Are we going to get back to those 2005 cars in terms of size? We are not, and I'm certainly not suggesting that either. Safety standards have come on significantly since 2005, and to lop a meter off the front of the car if it's going to risk the driver's safety, these 50 odd G crashes that they're having, no, like there's a middle ground to be had. Now, probably the only thing in the 26 regulations that's been viewed in an overwhelmingly positive way is the reduction in size of these cars. The wheelbase is dropping from 3.6 to 3.4 meters, not 3 meters like it was in 2005, but it's something. And the width is dropping from 2 meters to 1.9, again, not 1.8 like it was in 2005, but it's something. By making these cars smaller, you also inherently reduce the weight. So look at 2005, the minimum weight with driver was 605 kilos. Today in 2025, it's 800 kilos. In 2026, it will be down to 768. So still nowhere near as light as they used to be, but it's something. Look, time will tell how these physical changes actually affect the ability for these cars to go racing. I'm optimistic, and the trend of these cars just getting bigger and bigger and bigger each year seems to be going in the other direction. Much was made of the 2022 ground effect regulations solving dirty air. Say you're running 10 meters behind the driver ahead. Well, in 2021 cars, you'd be losing approximately 47% of your total downforce. And at 20 meters behind, it wasn't much better at 35%. But no worries, because these 2022 cars would only see you losing 18 and 4% respectively. An absolutely massive reduction. The cars following would have way more of their aerodynamic performance when they get close, and more overtaking, better racing. Problem solved, job done. No, because F1 teams are pretty good at innovating and adding downforce to their cars, and that comes at a price. The more performance teams would add, the more turbulent air it would create out of the back. All of these little veins that you see on the front wing end plates and the mirror housings and all this kind of stuff. It creates downforce, it creates performance, and it creates dirty air. And look, an F1's team job is not to make sure the air's clean out the back of the car, it's to make the car as fast as possible. That is not their prerogative, even if it does spoil racing. This is the job of the FIA, to keep on top of it and stop the teams going too crazy. And they haven't done that. I mean, just to get an idea of how much quicker these cars are now than they were at the start of the ground effect regulations in 2022, let's compare pre-season testing 3 years apart. The quickest time over the 3 days in 22 was set by Max, a 1:31.720, and in 25 Carlos Sainz set the pace with a 1:29.348. Now that's almost 2.5 seconds of difference right there. However, then you add the caveats of Bahrain this year being exceptionally cold, and the quickest time was from Carlos Sainz and Williams, which is obviously not the quickest car. If you had an equivalent lap from Max, is probably knocking on the doors of the 28s. I would say the cars have gained at least 3 seconds of performance from 22 to 25, about 3.5% that would be around Bahrain. That feels about right to me. In fact, talking to Carlos Sainz, he was one of the first drivers to kind of blow the horn on dirty air encroaching, creeping its little talons back into the sport. At the start of 23, after round 2 Saudi Arabia, he had this to say: "These cars in dirty air have become a bit worse compared to last year," talking about 2022. "They are starting to become a bit like the old cars where the dirty air is becoming a limitation." So 2 years on from those words, 2 years of additional car development, and these cars getting quicker and quicker and quicker. No wonder we're having stinkers like we did in Japan, even though the actual field spread is as close as it's ever been. If you could take the current field spread and put it with the 2022 aero regulations, like, it would be so good because we have the best of both worlds. But as the field spreads got closer, the dirty air's got worse, and it's kind of balanced out, which is a massive shame. I mean, Andrea Stella, when he was being questioned after Japan about why he didn't swap his drivers, was saying you needed at least 0.8 delta to even attempt to get a move done, let alone trying to get a move done on Max Verstappen, who is very, very good at defensive driving when he needs to be. That kind of delta does not really exist in this sport anymore, unless you're running at a tyre offset, which we'll get into in a bit. It just feels to me that the FIA have been more focused on changing arbitrary rules around flexible wings, which they've passed a static load test, but then they just changed the rules randomly. It was always going to be right. It's much better at the start of 22, but by the end of the regulation cycle, it's going to be worse unless you do something about it, and it doesn't feel like they have. I'm sure there's far more aerodynamically educated people out there watching who can maybe make some suggestions in the comments down below how the FIA should have better stopped these rules getting to a stage where the dirty air is kind of getting out of hand again. Maybe it's a matter of announcing some small tweaks to the rules that won't be enforced till the end of the year, maybe announce it at the middle of the season, right? So you let the teams, see the benefit of the innovation that they've brought, but then the FIA kind of pegs them back a bit, and then they innovate again, and then they get pegged back, and it just stops things going crazy. It's like at the end of 2020 when it was announced that those floor changes that definitely hurt the Mercedes and the Aston Martin more than anyone else. In that instance, I don't think it was anything to do with dirty air. It was more about slowing the Mercedes down, in my opinion. But something along those lines, because you've got 10 teams worth of technical expertise, they are going to find ways around and, you know, different perspectives on the rule book. The FIA don't have the resource of these 10 teams combined and 10 teams worth of knowledge trying to find loopholes. Like, they're gonna get caught out. So they just have to, okay, you bring the innovation, we'll look at the innovation, and then we'll just, if it's dirtier, anything that's like making the air dirtier, boom, we're going to peg that back at the end of the year. You can have it to the rest of the year. We stop this rules cycle becoming dull. Because I don't know what those 10, 20 meter dirty air numbers are right now, but I reckon they're pretty close to what they were in 2021, which is a shame. So then the final point that was very, very specific to Suzuka, a very specific mistake by Pirelli this weekend. The first sector had been retarmacked, which inevitably led to less tyre wear, and the ambient temperature wasn't crazy high, stopping thermal degradation rearing its head as well. So then when you take the decision to run the hardest compound range, which in the past in Suzuka works because you have the S's, it's a very high speed track. With all of these factors coming together, that wasn't the appropriate range to run, clearly. So in case you don't know, Pirelli can bring 3 compounds to any given weekend out of now a selection of 6 available to them. From the hardest, the C1, to the very, very softest that's newly introduced for this year, C6. High attrition circuits like Silverstone and Suzuka, typically, you want to run the C1 as the hard, the C2 as the medium, the C3 as the soft, because you don't want the tyres blowing up basically. And then low attrition circuits like Monaco, you'll probably run the C4 as the hard. So the hardest compound at Monaco will be a step softer than the softest compound at Suzuka, and then the C5 medium, and then the C6 as the soft. Look, tyre degradation might sound boring, but it does make for more interesting races sometimes. And in Suzuka, we saw that because it meant 2 things. One, that everyone could get away with doing a one stop apart from Lance Stroll when he finished last. And 2, everyone could make that one stop by pushing flat out constantly, no managing pace. They didn't have to worry about the tyres breaking down. Typically, you want a one stop to be a stretch, something that is achievable, but the driver has to manage, has to drive within themselves. The 2 stop is much more right. You just go balls to the wall, go for it flying, and see if you can offset the difference. And when we saw George Russell win, which then got taken away from him in Spa last year, that was an instance of, right, he managed that tyre to get it to the end and decided not to take the second pit stop, which everyone else did, and he benefited for it until he didn't, obviously. If they had used the C2 to C4 in Suzuka, I think we would have probably got that, because you wouldn't have had the super hard C1 that most people were just sitting on and getting loads of mileage out of. You would have had to have the C2, C3, C4. You have to use more than one tyre compound as well, so you'd be forced into that kind of Jack Doohan, Lance Stroll strategy where they both started on the softs, but even they moved on to the hards, and only Jack got to the end. So you're pretty much mandating a 2-stop without mandating it. Mandating a 2-stop, they're doing it at Monaco because I think they have to make that event more interesting. I'm excited for that. But at the rest of the Grand Prix, you want to pick a range that doesn't mandate a 2-stop, because a 1-stop can work and can be interesting and can mix things up. And this is what we didn't get in Suzuka. But at least make it hard to pull off a 1-stop. That's the problem. It was not difficult at all for everyone to do a 1-stop. So back to Jeremy's original point, I suppose. Don't use tracks where overtaking is difficult. Look, we got 24 Grand Prix. I want variety. I don't mind a street circuit. I don't want it to be the majority of the calendar, of course not, but I'm happy for them to be there. I'm happy with a Monaco that is more about Saturday qualifying, and even with the mandated 2-stop on Sunday, it's not going to make that race box office unless there's rain, of course. I'm happy with that though, because you've got variety, okay? There's some circuits that really reward and push overtaking, some circuits that are more about driver skill and maximising it, and because it's so impressive seeing these cars go around Monaco at the speeds that they do. The thing is with Suzuka, it's a classic, not just in F1 terms, but in broader motorsport terms. It's one of the most iconic racing venues in the world for very, very, very good reason. And this is why I say the formula is the problem, because it's making us consider absolute worldies like Suzuka, like Spa. Like Spa, we don't get amazing overtaking in F1, and sometimes the races are pretty dull around Spa. Yet Spa is one of the best racing venues in the world. You're getting these amazing tracks being made to look rubbish in Formula One. That's not the track's fault. That is the form. It's called Formula One because it's a formula that's created and then the cars are built to that formula. The formula is the thing that's faulty. And if we're going to move away from places like Spa because there's not enough overtaking, we'll just get more street circuits instead, which, yeah, some street circuits have quite a lot of overtaking. Okay, Baku has a decent amount of overtaking. What I'd rather over anything else is a formula that is designed in such a way that Suzuka and Spa don't look like snooze fests. And Suzuka, unfortunately, was a perfect storm of factors. Bad decision from Pirelli, FIA not keeping on top of these rules and stopping the teams innovating to this dirty air position, and a track that, yes, is even in the best circumstances difficult to overtake, but not usually impossible. So to call Suzuka's place on the grid into question, that's when you know the formula has f***ed up. But please do let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below. Drop a like on this video if you did enjoy it, and don't forget to subscribe to the Tommo YouTube channel. My name is Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.